Thanks so much to Yorinda and Jort for having me and inviting me to curate this conference day. It's very rare as a curator to have such an amazing carte blanche to bring together exactly the kinds of artists that you're interested in working with. So this is an amazing opportunity for me, and also thank you so much to Rietveld and the Stedelijk for hosting us. And on behalf of the Stedelijk, thank you for coming. I'm incredibly excited today about our speakers who have come from far and wide to join us to talk about the most important topic of care. The theme of care is an umbrella under which we can connect intersecting issues relating to race, gender, class, sexuality, and ability within our work as artists, art professionals, and students. And nowhere else is care most needed than in our daily interactions within the context of large institutions such as Stedelijk and Rietveld. Their very architecture, both physical and ideological, can make them quite intimidating places. Thank you to Yorinda and Jort for their excellent work practicing care during the process of preparation for this event. On days such as this one, when we attempt to bridge theory and practice and create an event based on our personal experiences, all sort of messy things come up, namely the practicalities and business of personal needs. The act of asking to be accommodated, whether it be a wheelchair ramp, a sign language interpreter, a preferred pronoun, an increased fee, these are all things that break the traditional social contract of selflessness in the face of the common good. Although these needs are really just that, they're needs, very basic requests for accommodations in order to function, too often are they seen as undermining of budgets and administrators, or just plain too much. Many artists who require care to function have been forced to make an art out of confronting this social contract. In addition to empathy, one of the effective strategies that we will visit today throughout various talks is productive confrontation. In a text about his experience working as an artist with a disability, Joseph Grigley writes, "Those who are disabled have this way of transgressing the equanimity of social life." This equanimity, or calmness and composure in a difficult situation, disappears when one must argue with an institution whose bottom line is a budget. When there opens a space for antagonism to unsettle this relationship, we start to consider our positions, and even the most hardened are forced to listen. This is a similar strategy employed by people of color, confronting white centrism and supremacy. Only by opening a space through confrontation are the most privileged forced to listen. There is a necessary violence to force us to implicate ourselves on the privileged side of a power relationship. Thus, today we will talk about disability in particular, but also about privilege and race, and how intersecting these topics are. When asked by a speaker last night about what my personal interest is in the topic of care, I replied that it is indeed a very personal one, that as a person who identifies as disabled, I find the disclosure of my disability an often awkward moment. My experience with care is related to my experience with chronic illness. Sometimes my illness is better than others, and it is relatively invisible. But the knowledge I've gained from having to ask for help, or for time off to recuperate, or for other considerations, makes me realize the incredibly ableist nature of the art industry. It taught me how to care for others. Although many of us have entered into the art world due to the fact that it appears to be a liberal field, in actuality, it oftentimes perpetuates normative ideas about labor, appearance, power dynamics, ability, and bodies in general. I believe that through conversations as the ones we're having today, we can work to change the field together. Our program today is comprised of many incredibly thoughtful artists and writers working through topics relating to communication, access, and care. First, we'll hear from the artist Luke Willis Thompson, whose recent work portraitizes the family members of victims of police brutality, all of whom come from Black diaspora. His recent portrait of Diamond Reynolds, the wife of Philando Castile, who was shot dead by a police officer during a routine traffic stop in Minnesota in the Midwestern United States, was executed through an intense process of consideration and care. He will talk about his work, his incredible considerations of both production and display, and screen his films and recent research material. Afterward, artist Jessie Darling will lead a workshop that treats the audience's experiences as a communal resource. Darling's studio of practice as a sculptor is an exploration of representation and a dismantling of binaries. Their work also happens to be on the cover of Artforum this month, and we're very lucky to have them come from Berlin. Later, I will engage writer Myrthe Berenson in conversation about her experience at the residency Beautiful Distress, which placed her as a writer in residence at the mental health ward of Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn, New York, which is an incredibly brutal place. Her work with Beautiful Distress highlights the confluence of class, and in particular, access to healthcare and mental illness, most keenly felt in the hyper-capitalist New York City with its underfunded healthcare system. Artist and writer Carolyn Lazard will join us via Skype and speak about their work focusing on intersectional feminism and chronic illness and disability. They also kind of approach the idea of a Skype contribution as a way to kind of combat the idea that traveling should be an art world, that we should all kind of be obliged to travel. And as many of us kind of become part of this EasyJet class of arts professionals who are traveling throughout the world, Carolyn is quite outspoken about trying to take back their time and not kind of give into this, but they also kind of have FOMO about not being here. So Lazard's essay, How to Be a Person in the Age of Autoimmunity, is a landmark text. And if you haven't read it, I really suggest that you do. It describes their personal experience with Crohn's disease, among other chronic illnesses, and disrupts the social norms, and how chronic illness disrupts the social norms of productivity, youth, and sexuality. Lazard's work argues that we should all identify as descriptively disabled, as so often many of us have various accoutrements such as glasses, special needs such as ADHD, so many of us are on the spectrum or cognitively divergent or have chronic illnesses, autoimmune illnesses, and this is all a way in which we can identify together as descriptively disabled and kind of break the taboo of that identification. So after our Skype introduction to Carolyn, we'll view a short video by them. Lastly, artist, writer, and professor Joseph Grigley joins us from Chicago as our keynote speaker. He has developed his practice over the course of nearly 40 years, and it spans visual art, archive creation and upkeep, and pedagogy. He was actually a very formative professor of mine at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago over 10 years ago. His work involves various writing practices as well. He's fascinated by obituaries, for example, and the ad hoc notes used as communication tools between himself and the hearing. He will speak from his own experience, navigating art institutions as a deaf artist, and the spaces open and closed to him from the kind of wavering access to institutions that is offered to him, as well as the strategies of confrontation and passivity that he would choose to combat this access issue. Lastly, we will have a roundtable with all of the speakers who are present, and we'll wrap up the day. Thank you so much. It's such a packed audience. I'm in this auditorium all the time, and I don't know if I've ever seen it so packed, so it's really exciting that everyone's here. And yeah, I hope we have a great day. Thank you.